Right, hey guys, how we doing? Something different. This came up recommended as I was going through videos. This is from a channel called The Salad Bar. This is how to write the strongest and how not. It seems anime related, so I thought check it out. And yeah, let's just get into it.
What makes a powerful character so great? There's a particular archetype that appears in many anime. Let's just call it the strongest.
Okay.
You know, the Gojos, the All Mights. Characters that, at least for some point in the series, completely surpass everyone else in terms of their power and skill.
Yeah, like they're the Pete Beerus, yeah.
They can act as a goalpost for other characters, or maybe as a mentor. Whatever it may be, it's something that pops up in most series. And the characters usually are relevant to the story somehow. Emphasis on usually. Because of that, the way these characters are written can greatly impact parts of the story, and greatly enhance it. The strongest characters act not just as foundations for other characters, but the actual series they take part in. Let's explore some of these characters, examples of strong characters done well, how they can elevate the story they're in, or how they can be fumbled in many ways. What makes this archetype so important and impactful, and what ingredients are needed for a proper example of this?
Yeah, what intrigued me was the "and how not" in the title.
Of course, there are countless examples of this across different series. I can't cover everyone here, so I'll take a look at some of my favorites from series that I know well and I feel I can analyze well. If I covered everybody, this video would be hours long. After all, the focus is more so on how to write this archetype, rather than picking apart each of these individual characters in depth. There would be redundancy at some point if we just went on and on. We only really need a handful here since we're just looking at certain aspects of them, instead of everything about their character.
Okay.
So if your favorite isn't in this video, that's probably why. There are also other characters who actually are the strongest, or very close to that, but it's not a huge part of who they are. So characters like that won't be discussed here. We're looking at characters who are blatantly framed like this, with that framing actually having some impact on the story. This isn't a power scaling video. So to sum it up, I chose a few characters that, 1, I feel like I could do justice in covering, particularly from stories I'm very familiar with. 2, characters that each have unique aspects to them, instead of characters that do things well but ultimately have a lot of similarities. And 3, characters that have strength as a definite character trait, and not just an inference. We're not power scaling, and I'm not glazing my favorite characters or whatever. I mean characters that actually are symbols of strength in their verse, even if they've been surpassed, or aren't technically the strongest. If they're narratively framed to be the strongest, that's what we're looking at. Let's start with a modern popular example, one who is flat out dubbed as the strongest, and is already pretty iconic. Actually, 2 of them, Satoru Gojo and Sukuna.
Oh,
both
okay,
from
we're doing
Jujutsu
JJK
Kaisen,
straight away.
the
Cool.
strongest of today and the strongest in history. First, Gojo, a very obvious and contemporary example, dubbed as the strongest on multiple occasions. Let's start with the basics. For a character to actually feel like the strongest, we need displays of that. Every fight Gojo takes part in makes him feel like a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, that's true. We get so many examples with Gojo just doing stuff that, like... Is it Jogo? The guy with the thing. As soon as he just, like, shows him his domain, and he's just like, what the bloody hell's going on? I can't understand this. Even, like, moments where it's explained, where, like, in the Shibuya arc, where he's like, I can activate this, but I'm only going to do it for, like, point something of a second, so as to not kill everyone around me, but it still puts everyone in a coma for like 6 months or something. So like everything Gojo does, we get so many examples of him being that strong.
In JJK 0, his first appearance, we don't get to see the full extent of his strength, which makes sense. It was a one-shot, and it wasn't focused on him. But we still get a good feeling that he's the top dog. Not just that, but he uses his power to help cultivate the next generation. His own experiences with power, that's what he uses to help the next generation, particularly Yuta in this part, as well as Megumi and Yuji later on in the story, among his other students. But in terms of him feeling like a vessel of physical force, we get a glimpse of that through his powers. The way he showcases his abilities and the types of fights he gets involved in, they all make him feel nearly unstoppable.
Yeah.
Especially when we see his growth in hidden inventory, as well as learning more about his backstory during Shibuya. He actually feels like a force of nature. There's no doubt about his strength. We're told about it. We see it grow.
We do
see
see it, yeah.
used in battle multiple times. He serves as a point of comparison for other characters. All in all, his strength feels tangible. But he also feels like a real person on top of that. Someone with the burden of immense strength, instead of just some character that is strong with no substance. So besides the actual displays of that power, it feels tied to who he is as a person. I made a video related to this topic, and how his strength creates a sort of identity crisis.
Okay.
If you want a more in-depth look, I'd recommend that video.
That was pretty cool.
But in short,
Maybe.
his personality and mindset feel like they're actually connected to his strength. Gojo's power has consequences. For him, for those around him, like Geto, and for the entire story, the entire world within the story. Literally, his power shifts the balance of the world.
Yeah.
He's not just strong for the
Yeah,
sake
because
of
we
it.
even get told that, don't we? We get told that. It's like, if Gojo wanted to, he could just destroy everything.
Strength has a purpose. The whole reason Shibuya happened was because of it. Hell, it's arguably one of the reasons the entire story happened in the first place, considering he shifted the world as a whole.
Yeah.
When writing a strong character, they should have some narrative purpose. If they're just an insta-win button, they're not compelling. They have to be an actual human, dealing with the consequences and responsibilities of that power that they have. And that's exactly how Gojo's handled. He's not just there to win fights and be unstoppable. He nourishes the next generation. He shows the downsides of absolute power. His existence causes problems to occur, but he still does act as a beacon of ultimate strength, and he feels like a force to be reckoned with. It's the perfect balance. And frankly, I feel like not enough people give him the credit for that.
No, I
By the
think
way, if you're
Gojo is
enjoying
very
this video
well
so far, be sure to drop a like.
handles.
It really does help the channel. Subscribe while you're at it too. Next up, Sukuna. Directly related to what I said about Gojo, and he's a unique case on his own. He sets a historical precedent. Not only is he a strong character actually present in the story, but we also hear of him as a legend, both a fabled powerhouse and now an existing powerhouse, which makes him a really interesting case in my eyes. In terms of all the characters I'm going to cover in this video, he's one of 2 villains. And of those 2, he's the only one that never actually redeems himself.
Gonna be the other
Plus,
one,
he's also part of the protagonist for most of the series, which...
Because Meruem's always a really good discussion point. Like, he serves as a comparison for the main character, for Gon. And to see Gon's dip and then Meruem's rise as a person, like more human, Gon becomes a monster. Really interesting thing, and it's really cool storytelling.
gives a unique angle. He's his own entity, but also is part of Yuji. So much of what he does is intertwined with Yuji's character. We see many JJK characters interpret strength or cope with it in different ways. Toji, Yoruzu, Kashimo, to name a few. Through them, we get a sense that there's some sort of solitude that comes with power. It's a theme present throughout the entire story. But like Gojo, Sukuna's outwardly named as the strongest. A few times throughout the story, actually. And he's a perfect representation of that archetype. Similar to Gojo, he personifies absolute power, as well as dealing with the themes and concepts surrounding that absolute power. With his reputation and how long he's lived, Sukuna knows everything about strength. It's basically all he knows. He uses his power to dictate his own life. He knows how strong he is, and because of that, feels he can do whatever he wants, and that satisfies him. Kashimo even asks him if that ever gets boring, living his life like that. But Sukuna enjoys it, living as the strongest, being able to kill and eat whoever he wants. It's enjoyable for him, and that's why he doesn't need love in his life. He understands it completely, but also knows he doesn't need it. I'm bringing up this aspect of him because this is another great way to write a strong character. One that understands the consequences of strength, one that's come to terms with it. A character falling into this archetype should know the implications of their strength.
Yeah, like he knows. It's not like, yeah, he is... That's what makes him a really good villain. Like, he's very well aware of everything and just goes for it anyway.
They should have a reason to use it. Whatever that reason may be, it's important that they can come to terms with it and exemplify or articulate it. It also plays into what I said about Gojo before. Sukuna's power ties into who he is and how he acts, affecting the cast, the world, and the entire story around him. The way he acts is because of his strength. Strength plays heavily into the identity of these two characters. Gojo possibly not knowing who he is because of it. That identity crisis that started when Geto asked him, is he the strongest because he's Gojo, or the inverse? And Sukuna, knowing exactly who he is, and knowing exactly how he wants to use his power. Let's move on to my next example, All Might. He's one of my personal favorites from a series that I don't often talk about, but still hold very close to me.
A series that's nearly over. There's only 5 chapters left, apparently.
All Might from My Hero Academia has been an example of this for a while. I'm covering characters that are unique in their own ways, and All Might's really unique because he loses that strength pretty quickly.
I appreciate he's doing different characters that, like, you know, it'd be boring if it was just like everyone he's talking about is the same, like, narrative. Like, yeah, All Might is a very interesting one.
Quickly, too. Yeah. Similar to what I mentioned about Sukuna, we get a sense that All Might's always been
weak and ill.
He's strong in the sense that he's a legend, but we actually don't see much of that, at least not early on. But through the way the series builds him up, even after he starts to lose his power, without even seeing any of his history, we get a sense that it's all true. He really is the greatest hero. So much about him is written so well that we feel the same presence that characters in the story do. We get an understanding of how great he is. And not just that, but we get to see him go from the greatest hero to losing that power, as well as him passing the mantle on. A lot of the reasons his strength is so well written is because of some of the same stuff I said about Gojo. For one, he has a presence on screen. He's drawn in a different style from everyone else. He stands out by default. He has the catchphrase, I am here. He's physically imposing too. He's a giant man. Even down to his design, everything about him embodies that of a great hero. This is something I won't talk much about throughout the video because we're focused more on the writing side, but a character's design is also really important. With All Might, you could just look at him and you could tell he's powerful.
Yeah.
His build, that smile that he has across his face all the time. And while the shadows on his face might look unnerving, he wears bright colors. One glance at him and you could tell that he's supposed to be a hero, a good guy,
very
and one with some insane power.
With the white, red, and blue.
One aspect of him that I want to focus on is how his power is written. Not his physical strength, I mean his actual ability, one for all. Just as important as the character themselves, fleshing out their actual ability can be really helpful here. and All Might perfectly exemplifies this. One for All and all the context surrounding it. It embodies hope. Right from its origin, it was supposed to embody that. Of course, not every series can write a power like this. The way quirks work, and specifically how One for All works, that give us the ability to look at it in this light. But it still serves as a great example of how to actually display these powers. It's not just All Might who has a history, his power has a history. This quirk alone inspires just as much hope as All Might himself does.
It is cool when you learn that
Throughout
it's
the
like
series, we
something
get
that
a
gets
deep understanding of how it works, how it was passed down, and the previous users of One for All, plus how it ties into Deku. And this ties into one of the core themes of the series, the fact that the previous generation is helping to build up the next generation of heroes, inspiring them with hope so they can inspire others with hope. All Might's status as a legend and his loss of his power, those all help build up other characters in the series. For one, there's Endeavor. For a while now, and currently in the story, he's the #1 hero. So it's also important to cover him as well because he ties directly into All Might, but he also does stand as that strongest hero. Endeavor is obviously a very complex character to cover. He basically requires his own analysis, especially with the sensitive topics surrounding him and how that context applies to his character. As I mentioned in the beginning, this isn't an in-depth analysis of each character, we're looking at specific things about how they're written as the strongest. And yes, that all does directly tie into his strength and how he molds himself into the #1 spot, but I don't want this entire video essay to be about Endeavor. He probably deserves his own video. So apologies that it's a little abridged here. But even with that, we could see that his position as the strongest does come with a desire for some sort of change. Obviously, his whole life he's molded himself around being the strongest and trying to get to that spot, and he felt like he never could reach it. There was just something he wasn't grasping, and along the way he did terrible things to try and achieve that, as well as trying to make the perfect child to accomplish that. And the reason I'm covering him here in the context of this video, it's all because of how he tries to understand All Might later on. He was always so focused on physical power, but he realizes that there's more to being the #1 hero than just physical force. And it sparks a huge change in his character. He tries to figure out what his power is actually for, what he wants to use it for, and especially with the tainted legacy behind it, how to move forward and inspire hope like All Might did. Bakugo sums this up pretty well in chapter 247. When telling Endeavor what he plans to do, he noticed that raw strength isn't all it takes to be the strongest. There's other aspects that come into play rather than just sheer power. Endeavor himself clearly has come to understand that. The work study not only served as an opportunity to have these 3 students grow, but also shows us what Endeavor is doing to grow as he realizes what true strength entails. As the #1 hero, he's ranked as the strongest technically, and he has to learn what it means to be #1. He chased that spot of being the strongest for so long, and now that he has it, he realized that he doesn't fully comprehend it, learning and growing with it more throughout the story. Just as Deku has to do when he gets One for All. He's always admired All Might as a fanboy, and to an extent he did understand what it means to be a hero, especially at that level. But both Endeavor and Deku were viewing this from wildly different angles, and they didn't see the full picture that All Might saw. So, each in their own ways and from their own unique perspectives, they learned what it means to be the #1 hero, and becoming a symbol of hope like All Might. It isn't just them either, but these two best exemplify this within the series. The title of the strongest is a mantle that can be taken in the series, but these characters have to fully learn and understand what it means to be the strongest. And even if they do have a flawed perception of it, they eventually learn to comprehend it more and grow from that. Next, onto 2 other great examples. Again, both from the same series and both contrasting each other. Isaac Netero and Meruem from Hunter x Hunter. I think it's pretty fair to classify them as 2 sides of the same coin for this archetype.
Yeah, again, okay, so, yeah, they're the strongest. They're portrayed as the strongest. Okay, yeah.
Netero, the head of the Hunter Association with massive power, and Meruem, the king of the Chimera Ants, born to be the greatest embodiment of power. These are 2 characters who we actually rarely see fight. Really, they only go all out in battles at one time in the story, and they both die within that same arc. And Meruem exclusively exists within this arc, yet still left a profound impact and fits this archetype at this point in the story.
Phenomenal.
I also did have an essay about him. You should check it out. Sorry, had to clear my throat. Anyways, Netero was always shown to be a powerful adversary. Besides his position, we see a glimpse of his abilities during the Hunter exam, despite never seeing him go all out until his death match.
Random one. I always love this point. When he uses one arm, one leg against these 2, he loses that arm and leg that he doesn't use against Meruem. That's KO.
With Meruem, we still get a sense that he's powerful, like the other characters that I've covered in this video. Of course, we see this to an extent when he's toying with Gon during the Hunter exam as he tests him, but we also get a sense of this just by his presence and demeanor. Everyone has a great sense of respect for him, and they revere him as a master in his field. It isn't until the Chimera Ant arc that we get to learn more about him, getting a look at his past and watching him train decades prior, looking at what exactly makes him so great. It's a perfect example of show, not tell. We aren't just told that Netero devoted a good portion of his life to having his mind, spirit, and body honed to perfection. We're shown it. We're shown the painstaking things that he went through for that, and how he ultimately improved himself. A master of martial arts, then mastering the self, perfecting the body and mind alongside it. He was always built up throughout the story as being one of the strongest people around. and it eventually pays off when we get to see his full power against
Him
Meruem.
against Meruem's
I
just
called each of them two sides of the same
fantastic.
coin because that's what they are. They contrast each other. Netero worked his whole life for his power, while Meruem was born with it. They
Gifted
serve as a
it, yeah.
dichotomy, showing two different avenues of power, which is why I'm covering them in this video. Meruem shows the raw talent side of it, being born into it, while Netero contrasts this, gaining his power through painstaking work and focus. As for Meruem, he displays a different side of his power too. Not only is he far above everyone, but he acts like it too. Immediately after his birth, he acts as the embodiment of power and influence. His power is the result of thousands of lives being lost to fuel him, and he's born only knowing strength and royalty. And yet, amidst his short life, he comes to learn that strength has corrupted him in a way.
Oh, yeah.
I go more in depth about this in that Meruem video. I'm not shamelessly plugging it because I want you to watch it. I'm recommending it because it gives more
I
context
think
if you
I'd
want a full
enjoy
breakdown
that.
about
I
this.
love discussions
In
on
terms of how it
Meruem.
relates to this video, Meruem grows bored with his gift. He has so much power and intellect that he can't really do much with it. He's just above everybody. He only faces his first physical challenge against Netero and his first mental challenge against Komugi. Both
yeah.
these forms of his strength are broken down against these opponents, and he goes through a rebirth, metaphorically and literally, realizing that with his power he really had no purpose in life, and strength doesn't give someone purpose. It's other things that give purpose. Beforehand, he was the king. He could have whatever he wanted whenever he wanted. He was royalty and the pinnacle of physical force. His case is unique, starting as the strongest and growing physically stronger too, yet rarely displaying his physical power and becoming more human as this happens. And he learns that happiness won't come from just being the strongest and being royalty. It comes from the little things. Ironically enough, the strength of smaller things is shown when he dies, being killed by a disease. This once powerful king being brought down by a microscopic entity.
So sad.
Power and happiness don't come from grandiose things. They come from smaller things. Each of them shows different avenues of how to attain power. And through Meruem we see how strength is broken down. When writing a character with such strength, this is a good way of looking at it, showing the faults of it and not just the upsides. Everyone I've covered so far pretty much embodies that. They show the upsides of power, but also the downsides of it. They understand the responsibilities and the consequences of their power. And if they don't understand that, they learn to understand it. Their strength affects their identity and the people around them in such amazing ways. They have a presence on screen. We actually feel like they're the strongest. And because of all that, now I'm going to cover an example that doesn't really show this. At least not in my eyes. Weirdly enough, it's from a character that I actually do like a lot. One who's entertaining for me and kind of does embody the same archetype, but has a lot of shortcomings when embodying that. Beerus from Dragon Ball. I like Beerus, I really do, but
yeah.
I don't think I'd say he's a good example of this. There are some good things about him, but none of what I like about him has to do with his strength and how he's portrayed as this archetype. When it comes to him fitting this archetype, I think he's an example of how to not write the strongest. Yes, I know technically he's not the strongest character in Dragon Ball, but I think he is supposed to fit that archetype really
Oh no, he's not, is he? Because there's the angels and then there's the Omni King as well. But
well, and clearly since his introduction he was meant to be this goalpost as the strongest for Universe 7, setting up a more expansive story and multiverse that we see in Super. And my issue with him isn't his consistency or lack thereof. Personally, I think his strength is actually relatively consistent because it's so vague. Rather, I'd say the issue for him is the fact that him being strong is never really explored. We don't know how he got there. We don't see him do much with that strength, outside of some scenes in the manga. He acts as a goalpost, but up until the Granola arc, it felt like he didn't do much to push people up to his level after his introduction. Goku was meant to be his rival, although Whis is the one to teach him, and Beerus just really sits there. Yes, he at least taught Vegeta and tied to his development somehow, but Beerus never really feels as involved in the story as he should. Not that he has to always be doing something and be in every scene, because he already pretty much is in every arc as is. In every arc of Super so far, he was involved in it somehow. Some more than others, but point is, he's always there.
Yeah.
But we never really feel a connection with his strength. We get brief glimpses of his power, but without the substance of the other characters that I've mentioned before. He's just there. We're told he's strong, we're never shown it. And again, I like his character. I actually like the fact that he's a lazy guy. His personality is endearing for me, but we never get any insight as to what his relationship is with strength, or his ideals about it, outside of some vague ideas about what it takes to be a god of destruction. In simplest terms, for me, it feels like Beerus' strength isn't actually intertwined with his character. He's strong, but superficially. It feels like his strength is separate from him. What little nuance is there for him isn't actually tied to his strength at all. And when it comes to others in the series, he commentates and observes, but rarely from his own perspective. For example, whenever Goku does something impressive, Beerus' input is just, "Oh no, he's gonna surpass me," or "Wow, great job."
Yeah.
There's no insight beyond the surface level. The closest we get is in the Granola arc when he has some sort of relationship with his power while
The
teaching
thing
Vegeta.
is, though, with Dragon Ball, it's not a complex story, is it? It's meant to be very straightforward, it's easy to understand. It doesn't go like even My Hero Academia's got more of a thought process with the storytelling. Hunter x Hunter is quite complex at times, even with its power system. It's like whoa. Jujutsu Kaisen. You know, Dragon Ball's just it's just Dragon Ball.
He has an actual investment in Vegeta's growth, and that's great. If he was like this for the entirety of Super, and not just Battle of Gods and the Granola arc, it would be
Again, I'm not saying he's not right. I'm not saying he's wrong. He's not. He's very correct on this. This is a really good video.
so much better.
Love the
You
editing
ever
as
notice
well.
how people always call Beerus a moving goalpost? It's an interesting thing to call him. I think his power is actually consistent, but the notion that he's a goalpost actually feels fitting. Like he's just a goalpost, and a far one at that. Maybe people feel that way because he's never displaying this power, and the series never delves into it. He showcases what it's like when a strong character is just a goalpost, exactly what I was saying not to do before. And remember with Gojo I said he doesn't just feel like an insta-win button? Beerus literally does that in the Mora arc. And by the way, the Mora arc is my favorite arc in Super. It's actually one of my favorite Dragon Ball arcs in general. But Beerus does nothing but watch, give some unhelpful commentary, and then when things actually get bad, and thankfully he doesn't do that, but what's the point of him being there the entire time and just watching? Is it really interesting to just have him commentate everything? I don't want him to be involved in the fight. That would obviously ruin the tension,
Yeah.
but he's handled so haphazardly here. He acts as that insta-win button that I mentioned before. I definitely feel like he's intended to fit this archetype, and that's what his role feels like. But the execution feels so lacking. We're totally strong, and we kind of see it sometimes, but never really in depth. The most he does is act as a safety net, insurance for the others, and undeserved insurance at that. Dragon Ball does have a good example of the strongest archetype though, Goku. And you could argue that he does serve as that archetype as the strongest of the series, but more so for the Z era of Dragon Ball. And obviously, out of everyone I covered in this video, he's the only one who's actually the MC as well, besides that brief bit about Deku. And I know I'm repeating myself a lot, but I actually made a video on this topic too. I'll also link that above. So I won't cover too much about him in depth here because, well, it's the whole point of that video. That's exactly what I'm trying to convey here. Weirdly enough, now that I think about it, I didn't intend for those videos I mentioned to be connected to this one. It just so happens that they are. Anyways, even Jiren stands as a good symbol of this in a way, which is obviously saying a lot because, as you know, Jiren isn't necessarily the deepest character, which I feel does work in his favor, and I actually do like how he's written. He's kind of a foil of Goku, and we get to see the actual relationship with his strength. So even though to some people it might feel like the bare minimum, it feels like more than Beerus. Side note, I actually really do like Jiren as a character. As flat as he feels, I think he portrays the idea of the strongest better than Beerus does. Because everything I said about Beerus, Jiren actually accomplishes better. But back on topic. Point being, in modern Dragon Ball, Beerus is supposed to be the symbol of that strength, and he's a definite, constantly present stand-in for that archetype. Strength shouldn't be a personality trait that exists in a vacuum. It can be a trait of their personality, and sometimes that's amazing, but only when it coexists with other aspects of the character as well as the story itself, not just an idea that stands on its own without any weight behind it. I think that pretty much sums up my thoughts on everything. There are so many unique ways to write a strong character, and there's so many different angles you could look at it from. Strength can introduce an identity crisis, like through Gojo, or a character could completely come to terms with their strength, understanding exactly what they want to do with it, and having that influence their entire personality, like Sukuna. The strongest archetype could act as a symbol for all other characters, inspiring them or even literally passing the strength on, as All Might does. Or a character could try and comprehend what it means to be the strongest, like Endeavor or Deku. It's always beneficial to see how a character gets their strength, like Netero, or how there's some negative aspects with it and it's not really too fulfilling, like with Meruem. And at the end of the day, it shouldn't just be a trait that exists without any sort of nuance. If a character is just the strongest for no reason and never displays that strength, or has no relationship with it in general, what's the point of that power in the first place? As we saw with Beerus. I know there were a lot more characters I could have covered. Like a lot of people suggested Benimaru from Fire Force, which I just started, so I can't cover that.
Fire Force, so
but now I want to hear from you. Which character do you think serves this archetype really well? And it doesn't have to be an anime character either, it could be anybody. Someone from a video game, a movie, a TV show, anything. And what do you think about the examples I outlined in this video? I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts. As always, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you on my next video.
That was good. That was good. I would have liked to have seen another example of how not to write, if you know what I mean. Like, it would have been cool to just finish off on 2, maybe. But that was cool. I like it. I like it. I might check out more videos from Salad, but I love me some Meruem discussion, so I might check out his Meruem video. But then this is also another channel I'm seeing called Johnny Star that I might check out as well. How to Write the Perfect Protagonist is on there. Which I think could be an interesting one. I like a little bit of analytical stuff. I love me power scaling, I love me comedy, but like, you know, when we get into a bit of a discussion, it's always fun. Thanks to my patrons. If you want to have your name at the end of every video and want to be able to watch Patreon-only reactions such as the original Dragon Ball series, links in the description to the Patreon page. $1 a month is all I ask to help support the channel. It is greatly appreciated. Thanks for that. And if you want to see my videos early, click that join button. Yeah, what do you guys think of that? What do you guys think of this? Click like, subscribe if you haven't already. Leave comments down below. Let me know what I should watch and discuss in future videos. And I'll see you guys next time.